The shit comes down. Free Huey. I got out of jail on December 8th, 1967. I came out with the feeling and desire to get Brother Huey P. Newton out of jail and to keep them from sending him to the gas chamber, because this was the party, and the party was my life. It was like a musician learning how to play a horn and blowing some jazz and really being with it in such a way that it's your life. It's part of you. This is the way I always felt about the party. I don't generally go into things about the party from the way I might subjectively feel about them. I try to project them objectively. But I also came out of jail with the feeling that I had a wife and I had a little baby. My wife wanted me to go to work. I have 9 trades: musician, comedian, community organizer, carpenter, builder, draftsman, journeyman sheet metal mechanic, general machine shop work, and non-destructive testing of machine and aircraft parts. I have a number of trades like that. But going to work wouldn't give me enough time, I felt, to work to free Huey. Before Huey had gotten shot, I was contemplating that half of my time would be taking care of my family and the rest of my time would be used to work diligently in the party. I felt that we would have to have some kind of financial support that would help back up the party. I knew I was a good draftsman, so before Huey got shot, I made up my mind to do the kind of work that I need to support my family at home. I would try to get private drafting jobs that I could do at night. If I could do private drafting at home, I could make money to take care of my family, and the rest of the time, if I could be flexible and be my own boss, I could do work for the party at any time, and in any way it called upon me to do so. I was only into having a family for 2 years at that time, but I really related to my family. This was my first experience at being married and having a family, and having this responsibility. I never really was afraid of the responsibility, but at the same time, I knew that life and living were not really secure with all the racism and all the exploitation black people were subjected to. After I had been out of jail a couple of days, I was riding down Grove Street with Eldridge, David Hilliard, Artie, and a couple of other people. I told Eldridge that we had to do something for Huey, but said that I also felt that I had to go to work, get a half-assed job, and possibly do some drafting at home to make some money on the side, and put some specific scheme together to bust out Huey. Eldridge ran it down that our real work was organizing people. "Man, don't worry about doing any work," Eldridge said. "We've got a lot of work to do. This isn't like leaving your family. We'll take care of that all together, but let's organize the people to free Huey." "You're right, man. I don't have time for a job." Before I came out of jail, I had actually known deep down inside me that we didn't have any more time to be hung up on jobs. With all this stuff happening to us, and these pigs trying to railroad Brother Huey. So we really went into motion, using every means we had, taking every speaking engagement we could, and rallied the community. The party moved rapidly to the campuses and held rallies and forums. We had funds and donations coming in. A lot of brothers were flocking to the party. There were a lot of brothers, a lot of party members who worked doing leafletting, announcing rallies, raising money, and stuff like that. Brothers and sisters would come back and report how they went out to collect funds on the streets of the Fillmore district. They would have buckets and cans to collect donations and funds. Some of the pimps would throw a $5 or $10 bill in, and some would drop $2 or $3 in. The pimps would say, "Is this for Huey Newton?" "Yeah, brother." The brothers and sisters would say, "You know you're making money. You gotta come on and cough up some of them coins so Brother Huey can have some righteous legal defense." The brothers threw the money in. I think Huey knew 3 main pimps very well. You know there's no really successful pimp, but there were about 10 of them who you could call successful in the Bay Area at the time, and I think Huey knew most of them. He knew most of the cats in and around the black community. So Eldridge, David, and I were all working and figuring out different things that were necessary to be done. A couple of days later, there was a court appearance for Huey. We went there, and I did a couple of press interviews about how we were trying to mobilize people for the defense of Huey. And that's how we launched our campaign to free our Minister of Defense. A white lawyer for a black revolutionary. Shortly after I got out of jail, I went over to San Francisco to check out Charles R. Gary, the lawyer the Central Committee had tentatively chosen to defend Huey. I had never met Gary before, and I guess, to be honest about it, I had a little tingling bit of racism still hanging on to me. It wasn't that I hated white people, but I had to find out if I could trust this white lawyer to fight for Huey's freedom. Everyone had said that he was very good. He was recommended to us by Beverly Axelrod. We had been considering a number of lawyers, Donald Warden, Clinton White, and a couple of others. White and Warden were both black cats, but Warden had too many guys who went to jail, some of whom we thought were on death row. The way Warden operated wasn't cool, we thought, because he would tell you one thing out of the side of his mouth and then go and do another thing behind the scenes with the police department and the people downtown. Clinton White had the reputation for being a good lawyer and a good fighter, but I was fearful that they would try to manipulate him, and Huey and the party would become political football. I really don't know if he decided not to take the case, or if the party decided not to hire him, because when I got out of jail, Gary had already been tentatively chosen. So I went over to meet Gary. He told me about the kind of law firm he was running, and why these political cases related to him. I popped up right away and asked, "How much money is it going to cost?" "Let's not worry about that," Gary said. "Let's worry about the fact that we want to free Huey." He seemed to be a very honest person from everything I could detect about him. Well, let's see how he works out in practice, I said to myself. I generally hold back on my judgment of people until I see how they work out in practice. A couple of days later, another lawyer was being considered. We went up to see him, and right away we decided that we didn't like him because he wanted $10,000 to $12,000 in advance, off the cuff. We judged that Gary's firm was a better firm and that Gary himself was a better lawyer. We looked at the man's record, the number of people he had kept off death row, the number of murder cases that he won, and those in which he had actually proven people innocent. From all this, and because of our concern for Brother Huey, we felt that it was Gary who was needed. 3 or 4 days after we made our final decision, I went to a meeting of the Defense Committee for Huey P. Newton, and there were less than 10 people there. I had read in the papers that there were hundreds of people on the committee. The problem was a bit of black racism, which was hanging on and which was very bad. The people who were originally on Huey's defense committee were all black people, naturally, but it turned out that they were mad because Huey's family and the Black Panther Party had decided that Charles Gary was the best legal technician available. Our argument was that we couldn't judge the man by the color of his skin. We wouldn't choose a lawyer just because he was black. We would choose him on the basis of his ability. We said that if you had a cancer or another bad disease, you would want the best medical technician that you can find. This was our argument, but they didn't understand it. We tried to show them that you could not judge Gary by the color of his skin. We tried to show them that Gary had no reason or desire to be a tool or a puppet of the power structure. We had to remind them that Gary had been viciously attacked by cops in the past when he fought for the labor unions in San Francisco, and that a lot of corrupt people in the local power structure didn't like him. The man had integrity, we said, and his record and everything else about him were all in Huey's favor. But they still wanted to hinge it on an old little thing like, he's not black. Someone even had the nerve to say that we should hire John George, a man who had never handled that kind of case. Those two kinds of politics developed in the black community, one on the basis of a racist line, another on the basis of our progressive line. Later, we didn't get along with John George at all, because opportunistically he sided with 100 or so people who only wanted a black lawyer and were trying to form a Huey P. Newton defense committee. but who didn't really have any power in the community. When it turned out that there wasn't going to be any black lawyer, most of them stopped worrying about saving Huey's life, but some worked to free Huey. So the Black Panther Party hired Gary, and when I went to this first meeting of the Defense Committee, there was only David Hilliard, Eldridge, myself, Huey's brother Melvin Newton, Sid Walton, and 3 or 4 other people who showed up. There were only about 8 or 9 people actually functioning on Huey's Defense Committee right after we hired Charles Gary. Eldridge and I were very pissed off at some of those people who had their little racist hang-ups. So many of them, about 60 or 70, used to crowd into meetings before I got out of jail, Eldridge told me. They used to stand near the door trying to get out what they had to say, just running off at the mouth. They weren't really interested in doing any work. When we hired Gary, they all dropped away like a bunch of little scared rabbits and racists. I didn't like that at all. Some of those people had been to college and had talked about all of the oppressive conditions black people were living under. The way I looked at it, their actions were tantamount to selling out the black community. Some of the local black lawyers and black cultural nationalists tried to attack Gary publicly. "You guys have got to have a black lawyer," they told us. "We just wanted the best one we could get." Those black lawyers had some kind of meeting in Berkeley and tried to condemn Gary. That kind of stuff even hit the newspapers. We realized that half of those lawyers were just thinking about money. They were thinking that we were going to raise a lot of funds for Huey's defense, and they wanted to get their hands on those funds and stick them in their own pockets. When we hired Gary, we didn't have any money. Gary's firm didn't get any money from us for a long time and went into the hole on Huey's case. Most of those black lawyers who condemned Gary never would have stuck with us when we were without funds. They would have gotten rid of us. But they really had to get up off Gary's back after he got Eldridge out of Vacaville in June, and later on when his legal and political work together with our community efforts kept Huey out of the gas chamber. Black racism is a fault of a few within the black community. Black racism is a very selfish thing. It is definitely not a progressive or a productive thing. Coalitions. 3 weeks after I got out of jail, we formed a coalition with the Peace and Freedom Party. Eldridge called me and told me to come over and meet some people who wanted to give us money to help Huey out. When I got there, he told me an organization, the Peace and Freedom Party, was trying to get on the ballot, and they wanted to know if they could come into the black community and register people into their party. We thought about it and talked about what Huey had said. Huey thought that we should not become an official party on the ballot at the time because he knew political repression was going to come down. The Black Panther Party wasn't massive at the time and hadn't yet spread across the country. Remembering what had happened to the American Communist Party, he was afraid that the government would take every person who was registered or attempted to register as an official Black Panther Party member and try to trump up charges on them. At the same time, we wanted to spread out a lot more and get a massive group of white people to work in their communities, because Huey had always held the position that white people should work to end racism in their own community. Eldridge told me that the Peace and Freedom Party would give us money and also give us $3,000 for Huey's defense fund. They not only wanted to register people for the Peace and Freedom Party in the white community, they also wanted to do it in the black community and saw us, the Black Panther Party, as representatives of the black community. I thought that that was correct and right in line with quote-unquote white mother country radicals, an article written by Eldridge. I decided we should form the coalition. Eldridge agreed that we should form a coalition for a specific purpose, which was an idea Huey had talked about. Later, we went to the jail and asked Huey about it, and he agreed. We had a number of rallies in the black community, in Hunters Point, the Fillmore, and West Oakland, with the Peace and Freedom Party supplying sound and technical equipment, which the Black Panther Party did not at that time have at all. With the $3,000, we were able to pay a fair retainer to Charles R. Gary for Huey's defense. In the white community, as well as the black, we initiated a broad campaign for increased concern about the problems of the black community, centered around our leader and Minister of Defense, Brother Huey P. Newton. There were a few black members of the Peace and Freedom Party, and they always said they represented the black community in the Peace and Freedom Party. We would look at them and say, "What do you mean? Huey P. Newton represents the black community." It got to be a hassle, and they would sometimes ask us what we thought they should do. We would say that they should join the Black Panther Party. We looked upon the Peace and Freedom Party as a predominantly white organization for the white community. At the same time, we saw that it was valuable to form a coalition for the specific purpose of encouraging black people to register in the Peace and Freedom Party instead of the Republican or Democratic parties who were oppressing us. With this understanding, we formed the coalition and later announced that we would run Brother Huey P. Newton for Congress from the 7th Congressional District and myself for the Assembly from the 17th Assembly District, districts that were half white and half black. There were attempts by the power structure to limit the party's activity with this coalition. We had a lot of clashes with a lot of different groups of people, but there were thousands of black people coming into the Black Panther Party because of what was happening. The coalition was a working coalition, not just a verbal one. There was some very good work done in the community. When the university students were being viciously attacked by the Berkeley police, the students understood that the people in the black community were being attacked, murdered, and brutalized all the time. The Peace and Freedom Party came to the realization that we had to do something about the police on a political level. The Black Panther Party agreed, and they asked us what we thought should be done. Eldridge talked to Bob Akavian, Rick Highland, and quite a number of others about the concept of community control of police. We began to work jointly on this with members of the Peace and Freedom Party, because it would not only be community control of police in the black community, it would also be community control in the white community. It was at this time that I began to think that some members of the Peace and Freedom Party weren't really concerned with Brother Huey P. Newton as a political prisoner who needed to be free. Many people worked on our campaign and showed concern, but some of them just weren't interested. Some of the leaders looked at it as a political lever or something to use, but others were earnest and really wanted to free Huey. It became apparent that many Peace and Freedom Party members would have to become more radical and more revolutionary. Many people did not understand that the very police who attempted to kill Huey were controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties, so they weren't very concerned with community control of police. They didn't understand that Huey's situation was inseparable from the needs of the community. We also saw that they didn't have a real interest in the community control of police. We weren't in good communication about it, so we just naturally worked on our own with the petition. This didn't make us against coalitions. It mostly placed us against people who allow themselves to stagnate, who think they don't have an issue, when there's a lot of hard work to be done. There was some 25,000 votes cast for Huey P. Newton for Congress in the 7th Congressional District. For the people who still thought like the old politicians, if a candidate lost, it was over. Some of the leaders felt that running Huey was a losing tactic, but that was not the case. They misunderstood how much Huey was interlocked with every black man in the black community who suffers from oppression. We'd run Huey again because ours is a revolutionary struggle. They acted like social democrats and were not able to advance to a higher level and continue working. The coalition began to split up. I still believe that if the Peace and Freedom Party would really rally its people together, their membership alone could place the community control of police issue on the ballot, but they wouldn't push for it. We will continue to have working alliances with other groups like Los Siete de la Raza, a group supporting the 7 Latino brothers who are accused of killing a cop in San Francisco. Alliances with groups like Los Siete have worked out a lot better than coalitions with white liberals because the brown American people are suffering from the same things black American people are. The Young Lords, a Puerto Rican gang that turned political, works in alliance with the Black Panther Party in Chicago and New York. They're suffering the same oppressive conditions that black people are subjected to. There's also the Young Patriots, who are a vanguard in the poor white communities. We can relate well with them because they are in opposition to the power structure's oppression. Alliances between poor oppressed peoples work out readily. It is the poor oppressed people who have to dictate their political desires and needs and explain what should be done and what should not be done. The organizations of the lumpen proletariat are the ones we can relate to. We even have a problem with black students sometimes because they tend to have a detached understanding of the realities in the black community. A lot of people don't understand that when we make coalitions, we're not trying to shuck people. We have no time to be shucking and jiving. When we get 3 or 4 brothers shot up and killed, we can't say that it was bad and forget about it because we know the pigs are coming back tomorrow. They'll try to attack us again. We know that because our historical experience is black people. We are not against intelligence. The party is very intelligent, and we read the same materials that the college students have read. But it's different when cats like Huey P. Newton and Eldridge Cleaver write and talk because it is coming out of a lot of experience. It comes from the guts of their souls. Stokely comes to Oakland. Early in January of 1968, we decided to have a huge rally in Oakland in support of Brother Huey's freedom. We knew that a rally for Huey would fill the Oakland auditorium, and we went about securing it. The auditorium is owned by the city of Oakland, and they said they couldn't rent it out to us because they didn't want black power advocates coming to Oakland to cause riots. We went back down there with the lawyer, and he told the auditorium manager that he should rent the place to us for any date he had open. "Well, I can't give it to them," he said. "If you don't give it to them," our lawyer told him, "we'll get a court injunction on you for violating the right of the people to be able to assemble in the auditorium. Now, there must be some date open, so you better just cough up a date." He decided to cough up a date, so they arbitrarily said, "Well, the only date we have open is next month sometime, February 17th. Eldridge quickly said, "We'll take that date, any date." When we came out of the auditorium, Eldridge ran back across the street to the county jail, where Huey was being held, and told him we were going to have a big rally for him and his freedom, and that we were going to pack the Oakland auditorium. "This rally is going to be on February 17th, Eldridge said. Huey looked up at him and said, "Hey, that's my birthday." Eldridge had had no idea Huey's birthday was in February. So right up there in the county jail is when Eldridge got the beautiful political idea that it would be a birthday rally for Huey, a birthday rally for the freedom of our Minister of Defense. I wasn't allowed to go into the jail to visit Huey. They have some kind of jive rule that after you get out of the county jail, you can't go back in to visit someone else. I didn't go up that time with Eldridge, but a number of times after that, I disguised myself and went up and saw Brother Huey. They have a little booth up there where you're supposed to identify yourself, but sometimes when I came up the elevator, there were so many visitors and supporters of Huey that the brothers just shifted me sideways away from the booth, and I went in and visited Huey. I don't think it's illegal, but they have this jive rule. If they want to try to prosecute me on it now, let them try it. Eldridge came out of the courthouse. The holding section of the Alameda County Jail is on the top floor of the Alameda County Courthouse, and ran it all down to me about how we were going to have a birthday party for Huey. We only had about a month before the rally. We went down to the Peace and Freedom Party and told them that we needed some money because we wanted to go see Stokely Carmichael in Washington, D.C. Stokely had just come back from his world tour of Vietnam, Cuba, Africa, and other places. We felt that Eldridge and I should go directly to Washington, D.C. and sit down and talk to him, and run it down to him because he really hadn't committed himself to coming to the rally yet, although we had told them about it. We asked the cats in the Peace and Freedom Party to finance that trip for us. They financed it, but not before we went through a few changes. When we first asked them, they said that they didn't have any money. Eldridge and I told them they were a bunch of liars. How can you tell us you don't have any money? If you don't have it, you can raise it. We need $500 in plane fare and $100 in expense money to go and see Stokely so we can secure this whole rally. So they said, well, we can get about $200, but we can't get any more. Well, you're damn liars, we said. You cats are talking about working with us in a coalition, and you want to go into the black community and want us to be key spokesmen there for the Peace and Freedom Party, but at the same time, we are talking about Huey's freedom. The reason we entered into this coalition was to talk about Huey's freedom. That's what this rally is all about, politically educating the masses of people that Huey P. Newton must be set free now. Are you cats going to be racist and jiving around and go back on your word, or are you cats going to be able to go out and hustle that money? We don't have much time because we want to start getting some other things together, and we want to raise some more money to print our posters. Then I got mad and I told them I didn't want to talk to them. Don't talk to me, I said. Eldridge would do this all the time. He would get mad and cuss them out and say the hell with them sometimes. Later on, I didn't do that, but at that time, I was overly concerned with Brother Huey, and I didn't want to be jiving around and anybody that was going to be bullshitting. We knew they had enough money to help us out. We were so concerned about Huey and the organization and black people that we felt that we had to use these tactics to make those cats see that it was important. Eldridge came back out of the office and sat in the car. Then they went back inside the office and got $500 and brought it out. I said, no, no, no. We can make it with this, Eldridge said. We haven't got any expense money, I said. We can get some. If they're going to have a coalition with us, I said, then they can get the other 100. I bet they've got it with them. So Mike Parker and some other cats raised that extra $100 in 30 minutes. That night, Eldridge and I got on the plane and split. When we got to Washington, we rented a car to get around with. We drove to this address we had for Stokely, and when we got there, we went up and knocked on the door. It was kind of early in the morning, about 8 a.m., but when we knocked on the door, the guy who answered it was uptight. The FBI and the CIA had been trailing Stokely consistently, but the cat looked at us, and he had to know that we weren't FBI or CIA cats. Eldridge told him we were the Black Panther Party, so they said, Stokely is sleeping now, come back later on. Well, wait a minute, I said. We come to sit down and talk. Well, you had to go to somebody else's house, the cat said. He wrote something on a piece of paper and said, go to this address. Now, what kind of shit is this? We thought. These cats are crazy. These cats lack understanding, placing their egos before the struggle. But we decided to go to the other address. When we got there, those cats were a little bit more hospitable. About 2 hours later, we went back to talk to Stokely. We talked a little while about different things, about going around the world, asking about Cuba and things like that. We went on for a while. We tried to relax, had some coffee, and then somebody brought in half a gallon of wine, and we righteously relaxed. After that, we got into the car to talk to Stokely about what we really wanted, his coming out to Oakland for the big rally. We let Stokely drive. He drives like he's crazy. We looked back and noticed that some cops were trailing us. They looked like FBI agents. Man, look at those cops trailing us, I said. Don't worry about it, Stokely said. They trail me like that all the time. But they're not even hiding themselves. Well, they know that I know that they're following me, and they don't care if I know or don't know that they're going to follow me. You mean they're right there on your bumper all the time? And if you speed up, they speed up? And if you slow down, they slow down? And if you turn a corner, they turn the same damn corner? That's the way they do it, Stokely said. Meanwhile, he's driving real crazy. I told Stokely that we didn't allow any cops to be following us around like that. Just leave him alone, he said. Then he took off and just started driving wildly, speeding down the streets and everything. He actually lost the cats and left them out of sight. He'd drive all the way up the street and stop. About 4 minutes later, the same cops would come after us in the same car. Then Stokely would turn around and drive back down the street. As he drove back down the street, the cops would see him coming that way. They would turn into a driveway and back out and have their car sitting in the same direction that Stokely was going. We would pass them and they would get right back on our tail again. They were never more than 30 feet away from him. They followed Stokely around wherever he went, 24 hours a day. Another time, Stokely cut out and completely lost them. We waited 10 minutes. Then they drove right up behind us. "They've got a beeper on the car," Stokely said. "What do you mean a beeper?" I asked. "They put a beeper on this car already. That's what I was trying to find out," he said. "You all just got this car, and they checked you out when you came to see me. While you were upstairs, they put a beeper on the car. Some kind of radar-type beeper that can find this car wherever it is. They already put it on and can find you guys wherever you are. That's how they keep up with my car. We cut out again and lost them. We lost them for a number of blocks, but they almost caught up with us. Then Stokely went into a park and wound his way up a road. It's not a big hill, but it's got a good slope to it. You go up the road and it makes a complete circle and comes back into itself. Stokely sped up this road and made a complete circle. Then the road came back into itself. So here was Stokely barreling down this very narrow road, coming right down on the cops. They saw him coming so fast, and they just swerved off the road and let Stokely go by. Stokely cut out while they were hustling to turn around and get their car off the dirt and back onto the road so they could continue following him. Stokely drove to another part of the park, almost a mile away. We just sat there in the parking lot and watched them from a distance wind their way toward us. We turned the radio on to try to drown out any bugging of the car that might have taken place. We talked about the fact that we wanted Stokely to come out to Oakland and speak, and that we probably would have 5,000 to 6,000 people there. Stokely agreed to speak, and we wound up our meeting with him. Eldridge and I went down to the SNCC office later that night. We talked to a lot of different organizations. They had heard about our coalition with the Peace and Freedom Party. "Why do you trust white people?" some SNCC members and cats from black nationalist organizations wanted to know. "We don't trust white people in the sense that you're talking about," we said. "We judge everybody by what they do." They asked us why didn't we get a black lawyer for Huey. We told them it wasn't necessarily true that if Huey had a black lawyer, he would automatically be well defended and not become a political football to kick around. We told them that we readily went forth to secure legal defense for Huey, and that the coalition with the Peace and Freedom Party was not something based on just trusting white people just because they were white. They should at least respect the fact that at one time there was a John Brown, and that the John Browns had done a lot more than some black college intellectuals had ever done. We respected John Brown for that. But we live in the spirit of Nat Turner, Patrice Lumumba, and Malcolm X. And Malcolm denounced every kind of racism in his last days. They were unable to understand this. They had a basic psychological block because, as Fanon put it, their intellectual possessions were still in pawn to the man system. A lot of cats down there were college students. They couldn't see it when we told them that a lot of their ideas were black racist, and that we couldn't operate in a black racist thing. They couldn't see it because they were trying to say that there was no such thing as black racism, and we were trying to show them that there could very easily be such a thing as black racism. Black racism is not overt in most people in the black community, but it's the way a lot of those cats in the colleges think. They think about their own selves being free, and They think with the same racism that a lot of white people project onto them. And you're not going to end racism by perpetuating more racism. We also told them that ours was a working coalition to get white people to work in the white community against racism, to destroy it, and ultimately get rid of it there. Our aim, as we said, was to educate the masses of people to understand that they have to get rid of the system that exploits us, get rid of the oppression, and create some real government. Well, all in all, the cats there, the SNCC people, and the others didn't accept what we were saying. There was also a rally planned in Los Angeles. On the day following ours, Ron Karenga of the U.S. organization had sent two of his bald-headed black racists to Washington because he had found out in some kind of way that we were going to see Stokely. He flew them in that evening. Those cats were trying to get Stokely to see to it that Ron Karenga would get to speak at our rally. Stokely was going to be on a forum with them in Los Angeles the next day. We didn't object to it. We didn't even want to argue about it. We said we would check it out when we got back to Oakland. The next day we talked to Stokely again and secured everything. We agreed upon when he would be out, when he would receive traveling expenses, and who was coming with him. We were aware that Stokely and James Foreman weren't getting along at all at that time. There had been a dispute of some kind because Stokely traveled out of the country without the approval of the Central Committee of the SNCC. But even with Stokely at our rally, we still wanted a working alliance with SNCC so as to better unite black organizations around the country. We felt that they should come forth in this working alliance to further the defense of Huey and lay a broad foundation of unified organizations across the country. We proposed this against their arguments that they didn't want to work with white people. We reminded Stokely that he himself set in motion the idea of white people working in the white community when he spoke at Berkeley about a year before this. The Black Panther Party had adopted the idea and saw it as something that was in opposition to all forms of racism. Huey and I respected it and used it. Now Stokely was saying, "Down with white people." He told us that many people around Washington, D.C. didn't want him to speak in Oakland because there were going to be white people on the platform. We told Stokely that there was going to be a Peace and Freedom Party member speaking from the platform, and we thought it was very necessary that he speak. The person from Peace and Freedom was going to set forth their understanding of what white people have to do to end racism in the white community, which is something black people have to understand. Stokely definitely agreed to come. We drove around for the rest of the day and talked in the car. The next day we left Stokely off at the SNCC office, cut out to the airport, and flew back to Oakland. We told the Peace and Freedom Party that everything was set up and that we were going to have a major rally. We knew that Stokely would definitely speak, so we could put things into motion. We publicized the event in the black community, and they did the same thing in the white community. We brought Stokely out a little early to visit Huey. There was a lot of press coverage, and a lot of people realized that it was time to come out for Huey P. Newton. It was one of the biggest rallies that ever took place in Oakland. Besides Stokely, Rat Brown and James Foreman of SNCC showed up. It had become clear to Stokely, to James Foreman, to Rat Brown, and to a lot of other people that Brother Huey P. Newton, the Minister of Defense of the Black Panther Party, had become the central leader of the revolutionary movement that was coming out of the black community on a new and a higher level than it had ever been before. The place was packed. Stokely, Eldridge, and I could hardly get into the Oakland auditorium ourselves. When we first announced the rally, we said that we didn't want any cops in or around the auditorium. We said that we would take care of all the traffic direction ourselves and that we had enough Panther Party members to do this. We said the community would support us in this. A few days before the rally, Chief Gain of the Oakland Police Department called up the party. Eldridge and Emory Douglas went up to talk to some of his lieutenants and captains. Eldridge told them flat that we didn't want any cops on the premises and that we would take care of the whole thing. The cops tried to shake hands with Eldridge, but Eldridge told them, "I don't want to shake hands with you. I'm just letting you know that we don't need any cops around the auditorium." And there were none, not a pig in sight, and naturally, there was no rioting. It was Stokely's first speaking engagement since he returned from his world tour. It was very important because it linked up SNCC with the Black Panther Party, although many people in SNCC were in disagreement with Stokely at that time. We had met with James Foreman in Los Angeles about a week after we came back from Washington. We had talked about his working with the party, and we told him that we wanted that kind of alliance. But Foreman was definitely against us making Stokely Carmichael the honorary prime minister of the Black Panther Party. He thought we should make Rat Brown the honorary prime minister. We saw then that there were factional differences inside of SNCC. There was Rat Brown running on one end with James Foreman directing things, and Stokely on the other end directing his own thing. So we decided that if they all accepted the 10-point platform and program, we'd make Stokely Carmichael the honorary prime minister, James Foreman the minister of foreign affairs, and Brother Rat Brown the minister of justice of the Black Panther Party. We thought that would give us a good group of black revolutionary leaders to unify the black liberation struggle across the country. So we had an SNCC Panther alliance. The alliance was supposed to be practical and functional. They wholly accepted being special kinds of officers in the Black Panther Party, which indicated that they saw the Panther Party as a revolutionary organization, which a lot of black people were sitting up and taking notice of, with regard to both our political line and our stand on the right to self-defense. We felt that these brothers should work with the party. We were attracting thousands of young brothers off the streets, cats who in the past had been in riots and what have you. We were also getting people from other organizations who were dropping their old groups and coming to check out the Panther Party, except for the bootlickers who were deathly afraid of cops and weren't about to mess with them whatsoever. James Foreman was going to be the head of a most profound and necessary political education program. He had spent a lot of time with me and Eldridge while we were down in Los Angeles. We asked Foreman to come out to Oakland too, and he said he'd definitely be there. Foreman was playing politics though, and his strategy was to try to keep the Panthers weak. Stokely at this time was only a field marshal in the Black Panther Party. We had drafted him as a field marshal 7 or 8 months before, and he accepted the draft. Foreman told us again that he thought we should make Rat Brown prime minister instead of Stokely. So what we wound up doing was to try to bring them all into the party. This was going to be the basis of the alliance, a working alliance, where united we would work together for the liberation struggle. They accepted this idea. At the rally, Eldridge announced that we were making Stokely Carmichael prime minister, James Foreman minister of foreign affairs, and Rat Brown minister of justice of the Black Panther Party. Foreman and Brother Rat Brown were also the heads of SNCC at the same time, and we respected them as that. Everyone turned out. There was a huge crowd at the rally. Rat Brown showed up by surprise. Nobody actually knew he was coming until the last minute. James Foreman set that up to strengthen SNCC. The rally came off. It came off real good. As Eldridge put it, it was the biggest lineup of revolutionary leaders that had ever come together under one roof in the history of America. That was just about the truth, because Eldridge and myself, our apprentice Bunchy Carter, David Hilliard, Stokely, Foreman, and Rat Brown were all there. We set Huey's chair in the center, the wicker chair that many people have seen in the picture, where he's holding the spear, the shotgun, and the shield, exemplifying the right to self-defense. This in itself made a big impact, a very big impact. We raised some $10,000 at that rally. for Huey's defense fund. It was the biggest fundraising operation in Huey's behalf that had ever gone down. At that time, it was the largest we'd ever had. We really needed the money because Gary's whole firm was working on Huey's case, almost on an around-the-clock basis. They must have been in the hole for $30,000 on us by then. After Stokely spoke at our big rally, we had numerous speaking engagements throughout the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area, down in Los Angeles, and all over California. The last speaking engagement we had was on a Saturday night down in Palo Alto. That night, the Berkeley police raided my house and arrested me. Breaking down our doors. Early in the morning, a number of brothers and I had talked in my house about the fact that we had raised $10,000 for Huey's defense fund and about organizing bigger rallies to raise the thousands of dollars we needed to keep our legal machinery together to get Huey out of jail. I left the house at about 12:30 p.m., and I know I left the back window open. That night, the cops busted into my house and found a sawed-off shotgun. In court, it came out that my fingerprints weren't on it, and my wife's fingerprints weren't on it. The shotgun was planted. They charged me with having an illegal weapon, and to poison the atmosphere, they originally also charged me with conspiracy to commit murder. Some cop said he overheard someone in my house saying, "We want rap." He said that later that night he heard the clacking of guns in my house. I didn't know anything about it because I was asleep. I was very tired from the preceding week of running around and going to different speaking engagements with Stokely. When I got home that evening, I went to bed. My wife woke me up around 2 a.m. and told me the cops were outside. The cops tried to pull a slick operation, calling me Mr. Seale and trying to sound polite. "We would like to speak to you about a disturbance in the area." "Well, I don't know anything about a disturbance," I said. "I don't want you to go in my house. If you want to find out about a disturbance in here, go see the landlord who's upstairs." "No, we want to talk to you in your apartment," they said. "There was a disturbance around here." "There was no disturbance in my house, and I don't want you in my house. If you want to see somebody about a disturbance, then go see the landlord." I had been talking to them through my apartment window. I was about to open the door all the way up, step out, and show them where the landlord was, but no sooner did I get the door 2 or 3 inches open when they knocked me up against the wall, put a shotgun at my belly, and started pointing a gun at my wife. I got mad and started hollering at the top of my voice, "Don't shoot my wife!" They handcuffed me, sat me on the bed, and went all through my house. I didn't see any shotgun that night. I was arrested, but I heard them say, "We got it." They expected to find it. We were made to sit on the couch handcuffed, while 2 cops stood over us with guns trained on us. Sitting there, I couldn't see who he was talking to, but a cop said, "Look what we found." The cop near me answered, "Yeah, we expected to find that." Then they took me out. The lady next door, who was later a witness, came to us after the bust and said a man had rented a room in her building 2 weeks prior to the bust. He was a white guy, a racist, this woman said, and all he did was watch our house. She had never paid too much attention, but had seen him out there fooling around watching us. After the bust, she realized what was happening because she knew this guy had called the cops. The next day, she asked him why he did it. He was packing his bags and leaving at the time, and he told her it wasn't any of her damn business. And then he split. That was the last we saw of him. The cops say he's the one who called him. I was charged with possession of illegal weapons. I had an Army .45, and I know there was a serial number on that weapon, that it was not illegal. In court, they delivered a gun with the serial number ground off, which is against the law. At the station, I thought about the arrest, and I asked the cops what they were doing searching my house without a search warrant. "We didn't need a search warrant," they said. "We've been listening to you all day." If they were listening to me, the main thing they heard was that we had made over $10,000 for Huey's defense fund. In jail, I thought that over again. They had our bail high, $6,000 on me. "They're planning to drain our funds," I said to myself. That must be what they're attempting. It was only a week after the rally for the defense of Brother Huey, and that is the only reason I could see for arresting me and my wife on such trumped-up charges. The charges against me were dropped by Judge Lionel Wilson. He quashed them on the basis that the policeman was lying, that he was contradictory in his statements, and because they had no reasonable cause to bust into my house at 2 o'clock in the morning. They said they had reasonable cause, but the judge ruled that if everything was peaceful and quiet, as they testified it was, they had no reasonable cause to break into my house. It was a legal search and seizure. A month before my arrest, the San Francisco Tactical Squad had busted into Eldridge Cleaver's house, trying to intimidate and harass him. They were trying to find a gun. When Eldridge first came into the party, Huey let it be understood that Eldridge couldn't have weapons because he was an ex-felon. The party had set that policy because we understood that we just couldn't get into a lot of illegal activity. Huey always said our activities should be legal. Eldridge followed orders and didn't himself have guns. One night after the search, Kathleen said, "What if we actually got attacked and didn't have anything to defend ourselves with?" Eldridge said that she would just have to get herself a gun, because the Minister of Defense had told him he couldn't have one because he was an ex-felon. So Kathleen went down to the store and purchased some guns. Eldridge told his police officer that his wife was definitely buying some guns, and as they lived in the same house, there was nothing he could do. Eldridge stayed completely legal about this and also stayed within the policy that Huey set. Huey made a lot of policies like that one, so we would have a legal organization. At the very beginning of the party, Huey had done a lot of research in law books, and he had also been in law school for a year. Huey would go to the law library downtown, and he also studied the case histories that were in North Oakland OEO Poverty Center, where we were able to obtain a lot of information. It was a multi-purpose poverty center, and one service was legal aid. They had 2 full walls of law books, so we could check into all possible laws that cops might charge us with breaking. We were very aware of the laws related to illegal possession of weapons, so that we wouldn't get caught in the snares and traps of the system. At the time of my arrest, thousands of members were coming into the party. Seattle started a chapter, and the Los Angeles, Southern California branch was already operating. My arrest was not only an effort to drain the party's resources, but was also an attack on the leadership of the party. Chief of Staff David Hilliard, Deputy Minister of Defense Al Prentice Bunchy Carter, who has since been murdered, Bunchy Carter's brother, who's now dead also, and a girl who since dropped away from the party were also busted the same night I was. I first realized that other people had been busted when I came into the jail. I saw this girl in an interrogation cell. I was completely confused because I couldn't understand what she was doing there. She had been working with the party almost a year. Because I had been asleep at my house, I didn't realize what was going on. I heard one of the officers say, "We've got the other 4 and we're booking them." When I was in the booking cell, they brought Bunchy out. They were going to book him too. He said 20 cops surrounded them with shotguns pointed at the car and busted them for nothing. I finished getting booked and made my phone call. When Bunchy was booked, we were put in a cell together. I really began to worry about Bunchy because he had been in prison with Eldridge and he was on parole. One of the things Huey and I dreaded was brothers in the party who were on parole getting busted, because the California fascist operation just sends them back to prison for practically no reason at all. I told Bunchy I had just made a phone call and that I would probably be out soon. "You'll be the first one I come back and get out," I said, "because you're on parole. My brother, John Seale, came to bail me out. My wife was in jail too, but I knew we could always get her out. The thing was to get Bunchy Carter out. 3 hours later, we bailed him and his brother out. They told me everything that had happened. There had been a pistol in the glove compartment of the car, and there was another pistol in the car, but it wasn't concealed. They told me how the bust had happened and what they were charged with. We got our lawyer and about $100. I told Bunchy to go back to L.A. to continue organizing and to lay low. He said he would try to deal with his parole officer down there. In March, the cops busted into Eldridge's house for the second time. For that reason, Huey P. Newton wrote Executive Mandate Number 3 concerning Gestapo cops busting down our doors. It stated that we had a right to defend our threshold, and that everyone must defend his threshold. If the police came up to our door acting in an unorderly manner, it said we could only consider them as a danger to our lives. Huey was aware that members of the John Birch Society, Ku Klux Klanners, and many other sick, quote-unquote, patriotic racists joined the police force and also work with racist vigilante groups. Information had also been sent to him that a number of these people disguised themselves. Huey set forth Mandate Number 3 for all party members that said that when someone came to our door acting in a manner other than as a police officer should, kicking in our door and attacking, we were to defend ourselves. By that time, we had chapters in Seattle, Southern California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and our national headquarters in Oakland. Every time they attacked us, the party grew. At that time, early in 1968, they were mainly interested in the leaders like Huey, Eldridge, David Hilliard, Bunchy Carter, and myself. When arresting us failed to stop the growth of the party, the power structure escalated its attack and began shooting us down in the streets, in our offices, and our homes. Shootout. The pigs kill Bobby Hutton. One day in the middle of March 1968, Eldridge called me up and said, "Hey man, come over here. I got something to hip to you about the pigs plotting to attack us." I went over to Ramparts, and they took me into a room. There was a white girl standing there. Eldridge said, "Tell Bobby what you told me." She ran down to me that she had been sitting in a bar and heard two cops talking about the Black Panther Party. One was saying that on April 2nd, they would have something for us. They said they were going to get rid of all the Panthers. I asked her if that was all she heard. She ran down some other things they had talked about, mostly negative things about the Panther Party. She said that they went over April 2 again and talked about doing the Panther Party in. I looked at Eldridge, and we walked out of the office. "What do you think, man?" he asked me. "Man, they're going to try and attack us," I said. I asked him if this chick was reliable. Eldridge thought she was pretty reliable, so we knew we had to check it out. 3 days later, an ex-policeman, a black cat, came over to the office and told me that he had heard some cops saying that sometime in April they were going to get rid of us. He had heard these rumors going around, and he thought he'd come down and tell us. I talked to Eldridge, and I told everybody that we were going to have to get some guns, keep the guns in our houses, and keep them clean and ready, because there's no telling what they might do. We had had some guns before, but I told everybody to be prepared and to make sure that if somebody didn't have a gun, to see that they got one, because there was no telling what was going to happen. We might get attacked at any time. At the birthday rally for Huey, we had announced that we were running him for Congress from the 7th Congressional District. The primaries to get Huey's name and my name on the ballot as Black Panther Party candidates running on the Peace and Freedom Party ticket were coming up in June. I was running for the state assembly for the 17th Assembly District. We had scheduled a rally in the black community at DeFremery Park for April 7th, a Sunday. It was to be a barbecue picnic rally for the Huey P. Newton Defense Fund and for campaign funds to run Huey and myself. We were already getting a lot of good response from the people. Many people had already said that they were going to be there for the $1 a plate barbecue. We had sound trucks and all sorts of publicity out in the community. We even got a radio station to announce it. We've been getting donations from stores of barbecue ribs, things we needed to make potato salad, barbecue meat, and stuff like that. We got chickens and boxes of wieners and lots of other food that people had donated to us for this barbecue picnic. At the same time, this rumor had gotten around inside the party that the pigs were going to attack us. Threatening notes had come to me from members of the sheriff's department. I assumed it was the Alameda County sheriffs. The notes just said, "I'm the sheriff, and when you come into court, you're going to get it." This kind of stuff had been going on for a while. I had to appear in court on April 1st, and we were trying to speculate on which one of the deputy sheriffs had written the notes. We were used to getting threatening notes, but the cats would never say who they were. If you get a threatening note from the American Nazi Party, you don't pay any attention to it. But when you get threatening notes from fools who say they're in the sheriff's department, you begin to speculate a little bit because you know the cops want to deal with you. So I holed up in an apartment while we were doing some quick investigation on whether one of the deputies who act as bailiffs in the Alameda County Courthouse in downtown Oakland had actually written the notes. We wanted to check out who was wearing guns and try to case the courthouse and look around all the buildings before I showed up in court to see if anybody was going to shoot me on the courthouse steps. It was all related to the rumors that they would try to get us April 2nd. I didn't show up in court, and the judge issued a warrant for me. We were going to try to expose this possible plot, and we figured the judge would eventually have to see why I didn't appear. But it didn't work out that way. Thursday evening, I was at the house where I was staying. I did some reading, got a phone call from Eldridge, and went to sleep. Then I woke up and decided to turn on the TV to catch the news. Someone said, "Martin Luther King was shot today." But I was in the back room of this apartment, and it didn't really dawn on me that Martin Luther King was shot. The sound wasn't up very high. I had just turned on the TV and walked out of the room. It didn't dawn on me that Martin Luther King had been assassinated, because here I was, hiding out in this room until we finished our investigation. Well, I came back into the room and some other kind of news was on, but all of a sudden it was announced again. "Martin Luther King has been assassinated." I said, "What?" and turned up the TV. Martin Luther King assassinated? It really got off of me. I went to the window and I saw a lot of cops. The cops weren't supposed to know where I was, but I saw cop cars coming down the street, 4 cops in the car. I didn't know what was happening. Then I saw 2 more cop cars coming down and going back up the street, 4 in the car. And I went back in the room and thought, God dog it, maybe they're trying to surround this place. So I went and I looked in the back. I was in the upstairs apartment just below the attic. From the little bathroom window, I was able to see an empty lot to the side with a lot of trees around the driveway of the house, and I could see a stairway going down. If I crawled across the bathtub and out of the window, I could reach the platform. I went back and shaved, and then called my brother up and told him to bring his clippers over. When we got there, I said, "Cut my hair." "Why?" "Just cut my hair." I checked out the closet of this apartment where I was staying. It belonged to a friend of mine. There were some clothes in there other than the ones I had been wearing. My brother left, and later that evening I got a call from Eldridge, who told me everything was all right. But the next day, it was bad, man. I began to think the monkeys had surrounded the place. I saw police cars every 5 or 10 minutes, and it looked to me like they were circling the block. Then I saw 2 cars drive up, and this is the thing that got me off. While I was looking out the front window, one car drove up 4 doors to the right, and when the guy got out of the car, he unbuttoned his suit coat. He walked across the street and started knocking on the front door of a house right across from where I was staying. "That's a cop," I said to myself. "I know that's a cop. Damn it, these bastards are trying to surround me up here." So I changed clothes right quick, put on some shades, crawled out the back window, and came down among the trees. Then I cut across the lot to the right and on the street, and I just walked down the streets of Berkeley. I saw cops everywhere. I hadn't heard any more news, and I didn't know about the riots that were taking place. I speculated that there was going to be some trouble, though. I ran into a cat I knew who didn't recognize me because I had completely shaven and had cut my natural way down. I walked up to him and said, "Hey man, what's happening?" He just looked at me. I said, "This is Bobby Seale." It had been all in the press that I hadn't showed up in court, so he looked at me and said, "Man, what's going on?" "Look, man," I said, "I want you to drive me somewhere, at least out of this vicinity, because I think the pigs are surrounding the place I just left. I snuck out the back way, and if they bust in there now, they might come looking for me, and I need somebody to drive me away from here." So I got into his Volkswagen, and we drove down to San Pablo Avenue and Dwight Way. The corner was flooded with cops, man. It was flooded with cops, 25 or 30. There was a police telephone on the corner that a cop was talking into. They seemed to be watching cars, but I just looked at them. I had my shades on and acted normal, and the cops didn't recognize me. We drove down and got on the freeway, went across the Bay Bridge, and drove out into the peninsula. We drove in the hills for an hour, and I talked to the brother a long time about the party and Martin Luther King and what was going on. I began to hear more about the riots and everything that was happening. I finally told him to take me to Palo Alto, where I knew somebody. When we got down to the sister's house there, I told him to take a message back to Eldridge Cleaver and David Hilliard. I gave him the phone number of the place where I was and told Eldridge to call me about the investigation of the possible plot. Eldridge called me late that night and told me that Judge States had pulled the warrant off and just didn't want me to, quote, start anything, as he put it. Early the next morning, April 6th, the brothers and sisters were cooking the food and preparing salads and stuff for the rally and barbecue at the Freemery Park. There were sisters down at Father Neal's church and over at David Hilliard's house cooking potato salad, and also in the back of the office barbecuing ribs. We had a real operation going with sound trucks throughout the community, 4 or 5 of them. We had leaflets everywhere and a big bus, the Peace and Freedom Party's big sound truck, telling people to be at the Freemery Park for a $1 a plate barbecue to raise money for the Huey P. Newton Defense Fund and for campaign funds for Huey and myself. We had a beautiful thing going, and we knew it was going to get thousands of black people out there. Since the judge had withdrawn the warrant on me, I came down to the office. A lot of cops were floating around the office. There were cops everywhere, many more cops than usual. That whole day the brothers were saying that if they attacked us, we would defend ourselves. One of the captains said he was going to transfer some weapons over to San Francisco. I told him to make sure they weren't loaded, to keep them all in the trunk, and to keep everything legal. But I said, if it looks like you're going to get attacked or something like that, you might have to use the weapons, because you've got a right to defend yourself. That afternoon, I met Eldridge at the Peace and Freedom Party office, and he said he was going to David's house that evening. I told Eldridge to take me down to the church, because I wanted to talk with Father Neal about going to Martin Luther King's funeral. Eldridge had the white car that the Peace and Freedom Party had picked up cheap and given to us. That was in the late afternoon. I asked Eldridge that since he was going to David's house to drop me off at the church, I then left with Father Neal in his car. After I was introduced to Father Neal's family, we sat down and ate. We were talking about the party and the party's philosophy. Father Neal was in a clergyman's organization that was set up so that whenever there was a disturbance in the community, this little group, a minister, a lawyer, and a doctor, would be taken to the trouble. Each group had a section of the city that it was assigned to. The organization had been set up for quite a while. Father Neal got a phone call, and all of a sudden he jumped up and said that we had to go, that they were shooting at somebody. His wife asked where he was going, and he said, "There's a shootout going on somewhere. The police attacked somebody and shot 2 or 3 people." Then I began to think about this April 2nd thing and those threatening notes from the so-called sheriff. I naturally thought about the party. We jumped in the car and drove all the way up to Berkeley, where the switchboard office was. They said the shootout was between Panthers and police on 28th Street in Oakland. At that point, I was wondering who the supposed party members were. I know a lot of people just didn't have any guns. I got as much information as I could, and then I told Father Neal I wanted to go down there. The other ministers started saying that they didn't think we should. Then information came over the radio that the shootout was over, and that they had all been arrested. The radio report said that Eldridge Cleaver had been arrested, and that Bobby Hutton was shot. At that point, they didn't say he was dead. It also said David Hilliard had been arrested, and 2 or 3 other Panthers had been shot. It was late at night by the time we got the final report. David and Eldridge were arrested, and little Bobby was supposedly shot. I felt the best thing to do was to sit down and start trying to figure out some way to get them out of jail. I gave Kathleen Cleaver and a number of other Panthers a phone call and told them to stay in their houses, and if they got attacked, they ought to defend themselves. I went to my father-in-law's house. I began to think about everything I could, about what had happened, and how to go about getting the brothers some political defense. Father Neal called me up about 2 hours later, about 2:30 or 3:30 in the morning, and told me that Bobby Hutton had been killed. He told me that Eldridge Cleaver and Bobby Hutton had somehow been forced into a house. As they were coming out of the house, Bobby had his hands up, but they shot him in the head. Eldridge and I had been spotted twice by the cops in the white car that day. We saw them looking at us and carrying on. I really felt that they shot Bobby Hutton thinking they were shooting me. I was mad. I knew Huey had said that we didn't believe in spontaneous riots, but I was so mad at that point that I felt that I was going to tell all those people at the rally the next day to turn Oakland upside down. I was going to tell every black person who came to the rally to tear up the town. I was going to tell them to hit the big man, the big-time businessman's business. That's what I was going to tell them. I kept thinking about the fact that Huey had said, "No spontaneous riots," but I felt differently with Bobby Hutton dead, and feeling that they thought they were killing me, and instead they murdered little Bobby Hutton. Maybe I shouldn't have felt that way, but that's what I was thinking. The next morning I went over to Gary's office so he could take me up to the police station where we had called a press conference. Before we went there, Gary went to visit Huey at the county jail in Oakland, and Huey sent a tape back and told me to remember to tell the people not to spontaneously riot, but to tell them to organize themselves, that the cops occupy our community like a foreign troop, and that we have a right by the Constitution of the United States to have guns and weapons in our homes. He urged me to tell them not to spontaneously riot because that's not the correct method, and because all it would do would get 50 or 100 black people killed, maybe 200 wounded, and thousands arrested as in riots in the past. He said we had to think of the safety of our people, even when brothers were murdered like Brother Bobby Hutton was murdered. He said I knew that and shouldn't act on emotions, but should act on the correct methods of the struggle. Huey told me to tell the people to arm themselves and put arms in their homes, and to say that if they see racist cops brutalizing and murdering our people, that we have but one alternative: to go forth as an organized force in our community to defend ourselves against unjust, fascist, brutal attacks. I went over to June Hilliard's house. June is David Hilliard's brother, 2 blocks from Defremery Park, where the rally was being held. A large crowd was moving toward the park. Gary came to June's house and took me up to Oakland Police Headquarters, where he had arranged for the press conference. I wasn't too happy about having it there, but I thought, well, if I'm with Gary and they arrest me, they'll just have to do it right. So we held the press conference and told the press what Huey had said. I knew Huey was right, and I made it a point not to function off of emotions, because emotions won't guide a correct revolutionary struggle. Then I went back to the park and spoke to the people and told them exactly that. I told them we were not going to spontaneously riot, but not because we were with the power structure. We're against the racist power structure of the pigs and the murderers. I told them that if we rioted, the only thing that was going to happen was that maybe 50 would get killed, 200 would get shot up and wounded, and 3 or 4,000 arrested. And that's too many warriors gone. I told them in those past riots and rebellions, people were exposing their disgust with the social evils that exist in society, but that now we had to organize ourselves and learn to defend ourselves with guns when we were unjustly attacked. I told them that we should go to our homes and make sure each home had a shotgun, a .357 Magnum pistol, and a .38 pistol. Be safe with weapons, I said. The Black Panther Party isn't going to get hundreds of our people shot up, killed, and wounded, even though they murdered Bobby Hutton and we don't like it. Bobby Hutton was a freedom fighter, and I ran it all down to them about Bobby Hutton. And you know what? Those people really applauded at what I had told them. It showed me that the people had learned from the past riots, that they had really learned that when they go out in big riot form, the only thing that happens is they are surrounded by Gestapo policemen and that they are herded around and shot up like cattle. People related to the idea of being spread out in the community. I told them that if the pigs come down in our community in vicious force, then we should move around in small groups of 3s and 4s in defense of ourselves. I explained to them that if the pigs bring tanks down to our community, the young brothers are going to have to use guerrilla tactics and learn how to take those tanks, because those tanks are brought there only to slaughter and kill our people. The people clapped, man. They really dug it. They really dug this understanding, and they got off with me and made me feel like I was doing right. It showed me that the people had learned. And what the people had learned is what the party had learned. That's the reason the organization came to exist in the first place. Getting on the ballot. After the April 6th shootout, we buried Bobby Hutton, as Fanon had said we would, and tried to get Eldridge out of jail. He was being held in Vacaville State Prison, about 50 miles east of Oakland. We began to mobilize people for the primaries that Huey and I were running in that June. Huey's trial had already been postponed several times, but the Peace and Freedom Party had been officially placed on the ballot. In May, while Eldridge was still in jail, Kathleen and I went to New York to help raise funds for Eldridge. I made a speech then that a lot of people wondered about. I said in my speech, "We hate you white people." And I didn't put it in the proper context of what I wanted to say. We didn't hate anybody for the color of their skin, but at the same time, we were reserved toward a lot of white radicals who wouldn't move or do anything. A lot of people got upset over that part of the speech. I laugh about it sometimes because I'm truly not a die-hard cultural nationalist. That night I wanted to knock a play we had seen in New York in which Leroy Jones and some others got on stage, silhouetted in shadows, and hollered, "Black, black, 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 black." That went on for 9 or 10 minutes, and it just got absurd. It kept going over and over. Black, 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 black. Every once in a while, a voice would change pitch, but it went on and on. It didn't make any sense. It didn't convey anything. We called Jones and Ron Karenga the high priest of cultural nationalism because they didn't really produce anything except fanatics. It would have been better off if they were going to express anything, to talk about revolutionary culture in a way that would change something. 4 or 5 Panther brothers and I sat in the audience and ridiculed it among ourselves. When I made that speech, a lot of people asked questions. Take everything else in that speech, and when you came to that statement, "We hate you white people," Weigh it with everything else I said. I was ridiculing the cultural nationalism of Jones and his black, black, black. They were embedding a form of black racism in the minds of the people rather than giving them proper perspective on the revolutionary struggle. In New York, people were interested in Brother Eldridge, Brother Huey, Huey's trial, and in the fact that the cops had murdered Bobby Hutton. Cops attempting to attack and wipe out the party had caused the party to grow. And when we left New York on May 22nd, 1968, their first chapter was forming. The primaries were coming, and we did a lot of campaign work. We had acquired a new office before the April 6th shootout. The Bay Area Committee to Defend Political Freedom raised some money and printed up 50,000 broadsides about what the government was doing to Huey. Half of the reason we ran Huey was to let people see that Huey wasn't what the power structure was trying to picture him as, a small-time hoodlum. Throughout the primary campaign, there was a lot of conflict. We had trouble with other black groups who were trying to run in the 7th Congressional District, with some peace and freedom people over $1,000 we thought we were supposed to have, and with some of the brothers and sisters who still didn't understand the significance of running Huey P. Newton for Congress. The night of the primary, our workers went out to get tallies of the vote, and the power structure gave them the runaround. They were told that votes weren't counted at the polls, but were counted downtown at the county clerk's office. They went down to the county clerk's office and were told votes were counted at the polls. The brothers and sisters got very discouraged when they came in that night and could only give estimates of the vote. When they tallied them up, they came up with only 70 or 80 votes. They thought Huey was not going to get on the ballot, and everybody was disturbed, thinking that not enough people would even take time enough to vote Huey's name onto the ballot. But I said, "What are you talking about? We're going to be on the ballot by 3 or 4 times the votes we need." They didn't believe it. I went down to the Peace and Freedom Party office and I took the votes they had tallied up from the black community and put them together with the ones that had come in for the Peace and Freedom Party in the white community. We stood there and watched, and a lot of people started coming in with votes from everywhere. The next thing we knew, we were way over what we needed. So I called up the brothers and sisters and told them, "Hey, we're on the ballot." They felt a little better then. We still believe a lot of the votes went uncounted. In the actual election, Huey got 25,000 votes. But I think the votes were tampered with because they definitely wouldn't let us anywhere near the counting. The primaries were important to the Free Huey campaign. We talked about the trial and educated the masses of people about who Huey was, so the people could come out to support him. A vote for him was a vote of support. One thing we found out for sure was how many thousands of voters really support the party. A person would have to support the Black Panther Party and know something about our basic ideas to vote for a member of our party who is on the ballot. Although presently we aren't running any candidates, we will work for candidates who support the 10-point platform and program of the Black Panther Party.